Demon Road by Landy. Chapter 1. 12 hours before Amber Lamont's parents tried to kill her, she was sitting between them in the principal's office, her hands in her lap, stifling all the things she wanted to say. "We don't stand for troublemakers in this school," said Mrs. Cobb. She was a fleshy woman in her 50s who wore a necklace so tight that when her neck quivered and her face went red, Amber expected her head to just pop off, maybe bounce on the floor and go rolling underneath her massively imposing desk. That would have been nice. "There is a reason we've been placed in the top 3 educational facilities in the great state of Florida," Cobb continued. "And do you know what that is? It's because we run a tight ship." She paused for effect, as if what she'd said needed to be absorbed rather than merely tolerated. Cobb inclined her head slightly to one side. "Mr. and Mrs. Lamont, I don't know you very well. In previous years there have been no reason to summon you here. In previous years Amber's behaviour has been perfectly adequate, but your daughter has been sent to my office 3 times in the past month for altercations with other students. 3 times. That is, I'm sure you'll agree, beyond the pale. Speaking plainly, as I feel I must, her behaviour this semester has worsened to such a degree that I am, regrettably, forced to wonder if there might have been some drastic change in her home circumstances." Amber's mother nodded sympathetically. "How terrible for you." Her parents were, as expected, completely calm in the face of overwhelming stupidity. That specific type of calm, detached, patient, but at all times veering into condescension, was pretty much their default setting. Amber was used to it. Cobb was not. Betty Lamont sat in her chair with a perfect posture and perfect hair, dressed smartly yet demurely. Bill Lamont sat with his legs crossed, hands resting on the understated buckle of his Italian belt, his fingers intertwined and his shoes gleaming. Both of them good-looking people, tall, healthy, and trim. Amber had more in common with Miss Cobb than she did with her own parents. Cobb could, in fact, have been Amber in 40 years' time, if she never found the discipline to go on that diet she'd been promising herself. The only thing she seemed to have inherited from her folks' combined gene pool was her brown hair. Sometimes Amber let herself wonder where it all went wrong with her, but she didn't ponder that mystery for very long. Such pondering led to the cold and darker places of her mind. "It gets worse," Cobb said. "The parents of the other girl in this fracas, we'll call it, have intimated that they will report the incident to the local newspaper if we do not take appropriate measures. I, for one, refuse to see this school's good name dragged through the mud because of the actions of one troublesome student." At that, Cobb glared at Amber, just to make sure everyone present knew to whom she was referring. "Can I say something?" Amber asked. "No, you may not. Saffron's the one who started it. She picks on anyone who isn't as pretty and perfect as her and her friends." "Be quiet," Cobb said sharply. "I'm just saying, if you want to blame someone, then blame—" "You may not speak." Amber answered her glare with one of her own. "Then why am I here? You are here to sit and be quiet and let me talk to your parents." "But I could let you talk to my parents from somewhere else," Amber said. Cobb's face flushed and her neck quivered. Amber waited for the pop. "Young lady, you will be quiet when I tell you to be quiet. You will respect my authority and do as you are told. Do you understand?" "So I'm not allowed to speak up for—" "Do you understand?" Her mother patted Amber's leg. "Come on now, sweetie, let the nice old woman speak." Cobb's eyes widened. "Well, I think I have identified the source of the problem. If this is how Amber has been raised, I am not surprised that she has no respect for authority." "Naturally," Bill said, as composed as ever. "What's so great about authority anyway? It takes itself far too seriously, if you want my opinion. You have a little problem that you blow all out of proportion, drag Betty and myself across town for a meeting we're obviously supposed to dread, and here you sit at your ridiculously large desk like a mini-despot, assuming you wield some sinister power over us. Betty, are you feeling intimidated yet?" "Not yet," Betty said kindly, "but I'm sure it will kick in soon." Amber did her best not to squirm in her seat. She'd seen this enough times to know what was coming next, and it always made her uncomfortable. Her parents had only so much tolerance for people they viewed as irritations, and the level of punishment they doled out depended entirely on how they were feeling on any particular occasion. The only thing Amber didn't know was how far they intended to take it today. Cobb's unremarkable eyes narrowed. "Obviously, the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. I can see where your daughter gets her attitude." Mrs. Cobb was now little more than a lame wildebeest, the kind Amber had seen on nature documentaries. Her parents were the lions, moving through the long grass, closing in on both sides. Cobb didn't know she was the wildebeest, of course. She didn't know she was lame either. She thought she was the line, the one with the power. She had no idea what was coming. "You've just said essentially the same thing twice," Bill pointed out to her. "Added to this, you seem to talk entirely in cliches, and we've been entrusting you to educate our daughter. We may have to reconsider." "Let me assure you, Mr. Lamont," Miss Cobb said, sitting straighter and smoothing down her blouse, "you will not have to worry about that any longer." "Oh, excellent," Betty said happily. "So you'll be leaving the school then?" "No, Mrs. Lamont, it is your daughter who will be leaving." Betty laughed politely. "Oh no, I don't think so. Bill?" Bill took out his phone, what he half-jokingly referred to as the most powerful phone in Florida, and dialed a number. "We do not allow cell phones in the principal's office," Cobb said. Bill ignored her. "Grant," he said, smiling when the call was picked up. "Sorry to be calling in the middle of the day. No, nothing like that. Not yet, anyway. No, I'd like you to do me a favour if you would. The principal of Amber's school, you know her?" "That's the one. I'd like her fired, please." Faint fingers of a headache began to tap on the inside of Amber's skull. So this was how far they were willing to take things today. All the way to the end. "Thank you," said Bill. "Say hi to Kirsty for me." Bill hung up and looked at Cobb. "You should be receiving a call any moment now." Cobb sighed. "This isn't amusing, Mr. Lamont." "Don't worry. It's about to get decidedly funnier. I have made my decision. There is no arguing." Bill held up a finger for quiet. Cobb was obedient for all of 4 seconds before speaking again. "If you're not going to talk rationally about this, then I have nothing more to say to you. It is unfortunate we could not work out our—" "Please," said Betty, "give it a moment." Cobb shook her head and then her phone rang. She actually jumped. "I'd answer it," Betty advised her gently. "It's for you." Cobb hesitated. The phone rang twice more before she picked it up. "Hello?" "Yes." "Yes, sir, I'm just—" "What?" "But you can't do that." She turned her face away. She was pale now and her voice was hushed. "Please, you can't do that. I didn't—" Amber heard the dial tone from where she was sitting. Cobb sat frozen, then her shoulders began to jerk, and Amber realized she was crying. Amber felt queasy. "Bill," she said, "maybe we don't really have to get her fired, do we?" Bill ignored her and stood up. "Right then," he said. "Amber, we'll let you get back to class. You're working at the diner later, aren't you? Try not to eat anything. We're having duck tonight." Her folks headed for the door, and Amber looked back at Cobb, who stood up quickly. "Please," Cobb said, wiping the tears from her eyes. "I'm sorry. You're obviously very important people, and Amber is obviously a very special girl." "Very special," said Bill, 1 foot already out of the office. "I'm sorry I didn't recognize that," Cobb said, hurrying out from behind her desk. "Special students deserve special treatment. Latitude. They deserve latitude and understanding. Leeway." "Leeway, latitude, and understanding," Betty said, nodding. "They've always been our touchstones for a happy life." "Please," Cobb said, "don't have me fired." "Well, I don't know," said Betty. "It's really up to Amber. Amber, do you think Mrs. Cobb should keep her job?" There was some part of Amber, some sly and distant part that wanted to say no, that wanted to punish her principal for her shrillness, her pettiness, but this was a part that wasn't thinking of Cobb as a person. No matter how much Amber may have disliked the woman, she was not prepared to ruin her life just to teach her a lesson. Yeah, she can keep it." "Thank you," Cobb said, her whole body sagging. "Thank you." "Wait a second," Bill said, stepping back into the office. "Mrs. Cobb, you accused us of being bad parents. If you want your job back, you're going to have to do more than just apologize." "Oh, yes," Betty said, clapping her hands in delight. "You should beg for it." Amber stared at her parents in shocked disbelief, and Cobb frowned. "I'm sorry?" Betty's smile vanished. "Beg, I said." Amber had been wrong. She thought she had known the full extent of her parents' punishments, but this was a level beyond. This was vindictive. Like they were running out of patience on some scale no one else could see. This was something entirely new. Cobb shot a quick glance at Amber, then looked at Bill and Betty. Please," she said quietly. "Please, can I keep my job? I beg you." Bill shrugged. "Yeah, okay." He swept his arm towards the door. "Shall we?" They left the office, left Mrs. Cobb standing there with tears running down her face, and walked the length of the corridor without speaking. Right before her parents turned right for the parking lot and Amber turned left for the classroom, Bill looked at her. "This girl you had the fracas with," he said. "Saffron, right? Wasn't she a friend of yours?" "When we were kids," said Amber, her voice soft. He nodded, considering it, and then walked away. Her mother patted Amber's shoulder and looked sympathetic. "Children can be so cruel," she said, and followed her husband. Chapter 2. The headache that had been building since lunch finally struck by the end of school, driving thin needles of pain deep into Amber's temples. She popped a couple of Tylenol, and by the time her shift at the diner was half over, the pain had faded to a dull throb somewhere at the back of her skull. "My folks are getting weirder," she said. Sally looked up from the magazine she was reading. "Sorry?" "My folks," Amber repeated as she wiped the table. She did her best to sound casual. "They're getting weirder." "Is that possible?" "I didn't think so, but do you know what they did today?" "They were called into my school and they made my principal cry. She literally shed tears. She was begging and everything. They traumatized her. It was so messed up." Sally shifted position, leaning back on the countertop in her red and yellow Firebird Diner t-shirt, and looked thoughtful. "That," she said eventually, "is awesome. I would have loved my folks to have made my principal cry when I was a teenager. When my two start high school, I want to make their principal cry. I hated mine. I hated all my teachers. They always said I'd never amount to anything, but look at me now, eh? 33 years old, no qualifications, and a waitress in a crappy diner with a neon Elvis on the wall." Amber gave her the thumbs up. "Living the dream, Sally." "Damn right," Sally said. "And hey, at least your parents are taking an interest for once, right? Isn't that something?" I guess. Listen to me. Just stick it out for another few years and then you can go off to college somewhere and build a life for yourself." Amber nodded. New York, she figured, or Boston. Somewhere cooler than Florida, where the air alone wouldn't make her sweat. "My point is," Sally continued, "wherever and whenever you decide to start your own family, you can do it right." She gave a little grin. "Okay?" Amber could never resist one of Sally's grins. "Yeah," she said. "Okay. Atta girl." Customers came in and Sally put a spring in her step as she walked to greet them. "Hi there," she said brightly. "Welcome to the Firebird. Can I show you to your booth?" Amber watched her, marvelling at how natural her sudden cheerfulness seemed. A smile from Sally could turn a bad mood on its head. It was a phenomenon that Amber had witnessed on multiple occasions, and it rarely failed. The customers smiled back and they exchanged a few words, and Sally led them to a booth by the window. Even though the Firebird was the third most successful 50s-themed diner franchise in the state, and Amber had no idea where that statistic had sprouted from, Wednesday afternoons were always slow. On slow days, it was policy to sit as many patrons by the window as possible in order to entice people in. Hungry people liked eating with other hungry people, it seemed. Amber had never been able to understand that. For as long as she could remember, she had always hated people watching her eat. She didn't even like eating meals with her parents. Although, if she was to be honest with herself, and if she couldn't be honest with herself, then who could she be honest with? Their inherent weirdness probably had something to do with that. Her parents were odd. Amber had known that for quite some time. Ever since she could remember, it was like they shared a private joke that she'd never been let in on. She loved them, of course she did, but she'd always felt like an appendage. She didn't complete the family, because the family didn't need her to be complete. Bill and Betty Lamont were so perfect for each other there were no gaps left for Amber to fill. Two guys walked into the diner, both in their late teens, joking and chatting. They stood at the "Please wait to be seated" sign and only looked at Amber when she smiled and said hi in her perkiest voice. "Welcome to the Firebird. Can I show you to your booth?" "Don't see why not," said the first guy. She smiled again and turned on her heel, making sure to keep the smile in place. She wasn't pretty like Sally, wasn't tall like Sally, wasn't captivating like Sally, and certainly did not look as good in her yellow shorts as Sally did. But even so, there were so many mirrors in the diner that to lose a smile at any moment could mean a drastic loss in tips. She stood by the booth in the corner and her two customers slid in on opposite sides of the table. "My name's Amber," she said, taking her notepad from her back pocket, "and I'll be your waitress this evening." "Hi, Amber," the first guy said. "My name's Dan. This is Brandon, and we'll be your customers." Amber gave a little laugh. "What can I get you?" "We're keeping it simple today. We'll take your cheeseburger deals, the whole shebang." Amber marked the orders down. 2 cheeseburgers with the works, 2 fries, no problem at all. "And to drink?" "Coke," said Dan. "Coke it is." "Actually, no," said Dan. "I'll have a strawberry milkshake instead." "1 strawberry milkshake, gotcha. And for you?" Brandon didn't look up from the menu. "Do you have 7-Up?" "We have Sprite," Amber said. "That's nice," Brandon said, raising his eyes to her slowly. "But I didn't ask if you had Sprite. I asked if you had 7-Up. Amber's headache started to spike again, but she kept her smile and smothered her words. She needed this job. The Dark Places convention was in a few months, and tickets were not cheap. I'm really sorry, we don't have 7-Up, she said brightly, like she'd just been told she'd won a bunny in a raffle. Would you like Sprite instead? Brandon took off his glasses and cleaned them. If I had wanted Sprite, I'd have asked for a Sprite now, wouldn't I? Please excuse Brandon, Dan said, grinning. He's in one of his moods. Brandon, out of all the drinks that they have here, which one do you want? Brandon let out a heavy sigh. I suppose I'll have a milkshake. Okay then, Amber said, pencil at the ready. What flavour? Well, I don't know. What flavour do you recommend? I've always loved chocolate. Then I'll have vanilla, Brandon said, and put his glasses back on. Dan was trying not to laugh at the antics of his buddy. Amber stood there and smiled. Sure thing, she said. Can I get you guys anything else? If we think of anything, said Dan, be sure to ask. Amber smiled and left them, fighting a swirling tide of nausea. She got through the swing doors to the kitchen and leaned against the wall for a moment, waiting for the feeling to subside. When she was sure that she wasn't going to pass out or puke, she gave in the order and stood beside Sally, both of them making milkshakes. What are your guys like? Amber asked, ignoring her surging headache. 2 businessmen, Sally said, slumming it, flirting real badly with me and destined to end up with some sauce splattered down their shirts. What about yours? The one in the glasses looks cute. He's a tool. But not that cute, Sally said quickly. In fact, if you had let me finish before interrupting, you would have heard me say he looks cute, but on closer inspection is obviously a tool. Amber grinned. You were going to say that? Sally nodded. If you would just let me finish instead of babbling on like you always do. I am a babbler. Yes, you are. Amber placed the milkshakes on a tray, took a deep breath and went back out. Brandon watched her walk over and Amber tried for a smile. It wasn't convincing, but it'd do. She didn't care about the tip anymore. All she wanted was for these 2 guys to leave, to take their bad vibes with them and allow her to wallow in whatever sickly unpleasantness had been threatening to engulf her all day. Now then, she started, but the headache sent fresh needles of pain straight to the back of her eyes and she winced, and the tray overbalanced and the milkshake slid sideways, toppling off the edge and smashing to the ground. The sound of breaking glass swept the headache away, and as Amber's vision cleared, she could see that the milkshakes had gone everywhere. They drenched her sneakers and splattered the cuffs of Brandon's jeans. Dan howled with laughter and Brandon glared at her, heat rising in his face. Oh my God, Amber said, I'm so sorry, I'm so incredibly sorry. I'll get this cleaned up, I'm so sorry. You stupid fat pig, Amber froze. You clumsy, ugly little troll, Brandon said. You did that on purpose. I didn't, I swear. You dumped it over me on purpose. It was an accident. Sally hurried over, mop already in hand. It's okay, no big deal, we'll get this. Brandon jabbed a finger at Amber. She did it on purpose. Sally laughed. I'm sure it was just, I want her fired. Sally stopped mopping and her laugh turned to a bemused smile. She's not going to be fired for dropping a tray, all right? It happens all the time. How about this? Your meal is on the house. Our meal is on the floor, Brandon said. Where's the manager? I want to speak to the manager. I want this fat pig fired. Sally's face turned to stone. Get out, she said. Both of you out. You're not welcome here. Dan held up his hands in mock innocence. I didn't do anything, he said. I was just sitting here. What did I do wrong? You picked the wrong friend, said Sally. Go on, out. Brandon kept his gaze fixed on Amber. His face had gone pale and rigid, like he was about to dive at her. Dan had to practically drag him to the door. Sally stood there with her hands on her hips. Wow, she said when they had gone. What a couple of tools. You okay, honey? I'm fine. Sally patted her shoulder. They're morons. Don't listen to a word they say. Sally helped Amber clean up the mess. The 2 businessmen sneaked glances whenever they could, and Amber couldn't blame them. Even mopping the floor, Sally was pretty. She didn't get red-faced with the exertion like Amber did, and her hair didn't fall out of its ponytail like Amber's did. She even looked good in the Firebird t-shirt. Amber tried her very best not to look at her own reflection in the mirrors, though. She was in bad enough mood already. The rest of her shift dragged by. When it ended, she pulled on a fresh t-shirt and shorts that weren't yellow and said goodbye to the cook and to Sally, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. It was already getting dark, but the heat was waiting for her, and her forehead prickled with sweat as her lungs filled with the warm air. She spent her whole life in Florida, been born and raised in Orlando, and she still reacted to the heat like a tourist. It was why, despite having a big 2-story house to call home, her bedroom was on the 1st floor, where the air was fractionally cooler, especially on a day like today, when the clouds were gathering. Rain was on its way. Lightning too, most likely. Amber had a 15-minute walk home. Other kids would probably be able to call Mum or Dad for a ride, but Bill and Betty had very firm ideas about what independence meant. Amber was used to this by now. If she was lucky, she'd get to the front door before she got drenched. She crossed the street and slipped down the narrow lane that led to the dance studio she had hated as a child. Too uncoordinated, that was her problem. That and the fact that the dance teacher had hated her with startling venom. Amber was never going to be as pretty as the pretty girls, or as graceful as the graceful girls, and she'd come to terms with that even as a kid. Her dance teacher, however, seemed to take issue with it. Amber got to the badly painted sign of the ballerina and the curiously 80s hip-hop dancer, and Dan and Brandon turned the corner in front of her. They were talking about something. Dan was chiding Brandon, and Brandon was looking pissed off. But when they saw Amber, they went quiet. Amber stood there, her legs stiff and suddenly uncooperative, and another headache started somewhere behind her eyes. Brandon grinned. There was nothing friendly in it. Amber forced her legs to work again, and she took the lane to her left. They walked after her. She quickened her pace through the growing gloom. "Oink, oink, little piggy," Brandon said from behind her. Amber broke into a run. They laughed and gave chase. She plunged out of the lane and cut across the road, slipping between the back of a laundromat and an attorney's office. Immediately Amber realized this was a mistake. She should have headed towards the pizzeria where there would have been people and light and noise. Instead, she was running across an empty lot and finding herself out of breath. A hand closed around her jacket and she cried out, twisted, got tangled in Dan's legs, and they both went down. She landed heavily, painfully, with Dan sprawling over her. "Ow," he laughed, rolling over. "Ow, that hurt." Amber got up and backed off, rubbing her hands where she had skinned them as she fell. The headache was a thundercloud inside her skull. Goosebumps rippled, her stomach churned. Dan stood, panting, and Brandon jogged up to them, taking his time. "This isn't funny," Amber said. "It's not meant to be," said Brandon. "Why'd you run?" Dan chuckled. "We wouldn't have run if you hadn't run. Why'd you run?" "Let me go," said Amber. Dan swept his arm wide. "We're not stopping you from going anywhere. Go right ahead." Amber hesitated and stepped between them. They loomed over her on either side. She took another step, started walking away, but the moment her back was turned, Dan was right behind her on her heels. She spun, her vision blurring for a moment. "Stop following me." "You can't tell me where to go and where not to go," Dan said suddenly angrily. "This is America, land of the free, don't you know that?" She could taste copper in the back of her mouth. "Leave me alone," she said dully. "We're not doing anything," Dan yelled right in her face. She flinched away from him. "Admit what you did, little piggy," said Brandon, circling her. "Admit that you spilled the milkshake on me on purpose." "I swear it was an accident." "If you admit that you did it on purpose," said Dan, the reasonable one once again, "then we'll go away." He was right in front of her as he spoke, but he sounded 100 miles away. She had to end this now at once before the blackness at the edge of her vision overpowered her and she collapsed. "Okay," Amber said. "Okay, I did it on purpose." They nodded, like they had known all along, but they didn't leave. "You made me look like a liar," said Brandon. Amber tried focusing on Dan. "You said you'd go away." "Jesus," he said, making a face. "Don't be so frickin' rude." "Okay," she said. "I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. It was stupid. I'm very sorry. Please let me go home." "For the last time," said Dan, "we're not stopping you. We're not stopping you from doing anything. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Are you really that dumb? Are you really that stupid? Stop treating us like we're the bad guys here, okay? You're the one who threw that milkshake on my friend. You're the one who got us kicked out. You're the one who ran. You're the one who made me fall over. My knee's bleeding. Did you know that? But am I complaining about it? Am I making a fuss? No, I'm not. But you won't stop turning this whole thing into some big frickin' drama." "I don't... What? What was that?" "I don't feel well." Her knees started to buckle and she reached out to steady herself, grabbing the front of Dan's shirt. He grimaced and pushed her hand away and she stumbled, and then Brandon was there, grabbing her, straightening her up. And then he hit her. The pain was nothing compared to the violent storm in her head, but his fist rocked her, sharpened her, and she saw him looking at his own knuckles, like he was surprised that he had done it. And then everything was moving very quickly, and when she felt a hand on her face, she bit down hard and heard a howl. Her vision cleared, Brandon's horrified face swam into view. She hit him back as hard as she could, and his jaw came apart around her fist. A moment stretched to eternity. She watched her fist. It was weird in this gloom. Her skin almost looked red. A deeper red than the blood, though. The blood that had exploded in glorious slow motion from the wreckage that had been Brandon's face. Was she doing this? Was this happening? In that moment, that luxurious moment, Amber found the time to wonder if she was imagining this part. Surely this was some sort of bizarre hallucination brought about by adrenaline and those increasingly painful headaches. There was no headache now, though. There was no pain of any sort. Instead, she felt wonderful. She felt free. She felt powerful. Time started to speed up again. Blood splattered her t-shirt and Brandon hit the ground, and now she could perceive normal sound once more. Amber registered his gargled screaming. Both hands were at his face, and he was crawling frantically away, leaving a trail of blood as he went. Dan backed off, staring at her, his face white and his eyes wide and utterly terrified. She had done that. The blood and the screaming and the shattered bones. It had been no hallucination. She had done that. She raised her blood-speckled hand. Normal skin again. That was good. Normal was good. Something in her mouth, something that tasted of copper. She spat. Brandon's finger hit the ground. Amber turned and ran.